Good morning. I'm really excited about today's session. We are really close to the end of our time together. We got many submissions last night. Kids getting their poems in the 12th hour, so to speak. I want to give a shout out to those of you who submitted poems where we can see evidence of using some of the revision strategies that we've been talking about. A special shout out to Abby Brown-Krause, who revised her poem to make certain that she included each of the 5 senses in her poem. Great job. We'll be announcing winners on Friday at our celebration, and we'll tell you a little bit more about that at the end and again tomorrow, at the end of this session and tomorrow. As we always do, I go back in after the lessons in between mine and add any strategies, any poetic elements or characteristics to our growing chart. And so after Lisa's lesson yesterday, I added where we have that poets create or paint a picture in our minds, that poets use beautiful language. So that's now part of our definition chart. And as we near the end, I've been thinking that sometimes we get into a rut. I love free verse. I love to write poems that use beautiful language, that have rich, descriptive imagery in them. Those are the poems that I tend to write. And so when I look through my folder, I realize that many of my poems are similar in that regard. They're using those same characteristics and elements. And I thought, I'm going to dip my toes into new waters today and try some things that I haven't tried before. And so I thought I would use a good resource to kind of remind me of the things that we've been learning and the elements, characteristics, and the types of poetry, that I would revisit the revision checklist that Lorraine shared with you the other day. And as I look down the list, because I like free verse and it's easy for me to use metaphors and similes. I use personification and alliteration. Alliteration is when words start with the same letter. And I incorporated that into my magnetic poetry poem that I wrote that very first session with you. And I use words that paint pictures in the poet's mind. I know that, and in the mind of readers. And I close my eyes and I try to get visual images in my mind that I want to incorporate into the words of my poem. I like those surprise endings, or as Lisa referred to them as zingers. I like to use that kind of leave the reader wondering and thinking more at the end. And of course, I'm very aware of line breaks. I know how important they are in establishing the meaning of the poem and the rhythm and flow of the poem. But as I look at this chart, especially at the bottom, I see rhyme is on here. To be honest, I have never written a rhyming poem, or that's not entirely true because I tried my hand at it yesterday. I wrote one ode a long time ago, and I thought I'm going to try an ode again now. And I've never written my poem within a shape that represents the topic of my poem. So I thought I would challenge myself that way as well. If you are a kid or adult who likes to rhyme, likes to read rhyme, and your poems, you like to use rhyme, please, in the chat box, send me a thumbs up. Let me know now that you're a rhymer. And if you're a student or an adult, and if I asked you, who is your favorite poet, and you would say Shel Silverstein, then send me another thumbs up. I like his book, Where the Sidewalk Ends. And some of his poems are fun, but he's not my favorite poet. Lillian Moore, Eloise Greenfield, Langston Hughes are some of my favorite poets. Pablo Neruda, because they write the kind of poetry. I read that. The kind of poems that they write are the ones I like to read because they're the ones I like to write. So in challenging myself to write a rhyming poem today, I decided I need a lot of help. And I went back and I viewed Lorraine's 2 videos, her 2 lessons on rhyme. In the first one, I learned so much about rhyming pairs of words, and I learned a lot about patterns in rhyming. And I thought, I want to incorporate that into my poem. I want to think about that consciously. And I also know that her idea of using a brainstorming web would help me in my quest to write a rhyming poem. So I first needed to make a decision as to which poem I wanted to rhyme. And I wanted to try as an ode and as a shape poem. And so I decided to pull out my New York City poem. I like this poem. I think I did a good job of writing a list poem. I incorporated a lot of things in the body of my poem, the center of my poem, and I was intent on using a beginning and ending line, making that the same, so it was a circle poem. I feel good about this poem, but there's a lot of content in this poem, and I could see it in some of these other forms and as a rhyming poem. And I also pulled out, or brought over here, this memento that I keep on my desk upstairs. And I keep paper clips in it, and it's got the Statue of Liberty and the Empire State Building, some city skyscrapers. And I know that objects evoke memories, and they bring us back to the places that we love and care about and think about. So I brought that out as well. And so I decided to create my brainstorm web using the ideas that Lorraine put into her and shared with us in her video. So I put New York City in the center. I have my topic once I decided that I would use New York City, my list poem, as the poem I wanted to revise. And around the outside in these circles, I included, as Lorraine suggested, different important words: street food, Yankees, Central Park, and holidays being my favorite time of year. And then I went back in and used these rectangles to put some rhyming words in. And so for Central Park, dark, barks, dark, art. And for the holidays' favorite time of year, I have cheer, fear, leer. And street food, I have mood, rude, viewed, chewed, and then Yankees, ease, tease, please. So I had some help, some ideas of the words I wanted to use. And because there are these four parts that were in my list poem, and I'm going to keep that into this rhyming poem, I decided my poem would have 4 verses. Verses are the different parts of our poem. And I thought about Louise Greenfield's poem, Things, that I shared with you the very first day. And she has 3 parts to her poem. So she has 3 verses or stanzas. And she's done something very interesting that I knew would help me in writing my 4-verse poem. And that's that she has white space, the space between each of her verses. And just as line breaks tell us to take a pause, the white space in a poem tells us to take an even longer pause. It kind of leaves some room for us to breathe in between each verse of the poem. So here's my go at a rhyming poem. Cheering fans who want to please, stuffing their faces with nachos and cheese, watching the records breaking with ease, as the crowd is screaming, "Let's go, Yankees!" On the street, the smells are sweet. Eating while walking is hard to beat. There's nothing like New York street food. Chestnuts and hot dogs put me in a good mood. Growing up in this concrete city, for peace of mind there's Central Park, an oasis of greenery to escape the gritty, skating, boating, and concerts in the dark. My favorite New York time of year, windows are dressed with holiday cheer. Strolling Fifth Avenue fills me with delight. The rock-centered tree is quite a sight. New York City will always be my heart town. So I have to say I'm pleased with myself. Rhyming is hard, and I came up with rhyming pairs of words and words that seem to work and still keep the sense, the meaning of my poem intact. And I found when I went back in and thought about some of the things that Lorraine taught us about patterns, that my first verse has the pattern A, 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 A. so all the ending words rhyme. In my second verse, it's the pattern of AABB, so sweet and beat, and then food and mood. And then in the third verse, growing up in the concrete city, it's AABB, sweet, beat, food, mood. In the third verse, ABAB, so city and gritty, park and dark. And in the very last verse, AABB, year, cheer, and then delight, sight. So I'm proud of myself and the work that I did. I want to thank Lorraine, and I want to thank my writing buddy, my writing partner, Richard, my husband. It's good to have writing buddies and reading buddies, and he helped me as I thought through the rhyme of my poem. For my next try, I thought I would do an ode. Lisa told us in her lesson that it's important when writing an ode to pick a place or a thing that you really love, that you care a lot about. And as you know from my list poem, New York City is a place that I really love. I carry it with me now that I'm living in Houston. That's what makes it my heart town. And so that works well and is an obvious fit. I looked at the different guidelines that Lisa gave us for writing an ode poem. You're picking a place that you love, and you're exalting it. You're raising it to new levels. You're showing your love and appreciation for it. You speak directly to the subject of your poem. You use adjectives to describe it, and you give it human qualities. So it brings it to life, and you use a repeated line. So here's my revised ode. I also have to say before I share the poem that I went into my heart map, because there are many things in this heart map that were not included in my list poem. And my eyes the words that popped out that my eye caught my attention is that in the part about the holidays, I used and wrote Swarovski, crystal encrusted star. And I thought, I want to incorporate some of that beautiful language in this poem, in this ode to New York. New York, you never sleep. A constant hustle bustle, East River to the Hudson, Lady Liberty to Yankee Stadium. New York, you'll always be my heart town. At holiday season, dressed to the nines, magical and dazzling. The Swarovski crystal encrusted star, your crown. New York, you'll always be my heart town. Winter's scent, pine and chestnut. In spring, eau de parfum, Central Park, floral and sweet. New York, you'll always be my heart town. New York, you're a delicious red apple, crunchy and crisp. When I take a big bite, I'm always sated. I must say that when I finished writing this poem, I thought, I may like this more than my list poem. I surprised myself. And that's what happens when you try something in a different way. You explore new territory. So changing the form of my poem from a list poem to an ode really made a difference. And ultimately, this might be the one I would publish. And last, I thought this makes perfect sense. I had never really thought about envisioning my poem, the words of my poem, in a particular shape that matches. And again, this is a good choice because New York City is filled with skyscrapers, lots of visual images that I could put the words into those shapes. It's known as the Big Apple. So we've got skyscrapers in the Big Apple and landmarks like the Statue of Liberty or the Empire State Building. And I made the decision, because my list poem has the words going down the middle, that I would turn it into a skyscraper and see what it looks like. And I kept the words the same. I just had them fit into the shape of the poem. So here's my poem about New York City as a skyscraper in that form. And so I want to thank Lorraine for sharing information and ideas around writing shape poems. Revision is the act of seeing again. And we think when we're finished writing, that it sounds good, we've achieved what we intended to do when we set out to write it. We kind of, as I said the other day, tap ourselves on the back. But now we have the opportunity with revision to make our poem shine, to make changes and to surprise ourselves, to try some new things and revise our poems with those new ideas in my mind. So I'm going to invite you after our session today to sift through your folder, find a poem. It may be a poem you think is perfect the way it is, but pull that poem out. That poem, what you wrote about in that poem will be the topic for your revision today. And I invite you to look at the checklist, and as you look at your poem, identifying what type of poem it is, and then seeing other possibilities, other forms of poetry that you could try. I was tempted to do a haiku. I was tempted to explore using alliteration, which I haven't used much in my poetry. So look at the checklist, kind of see what you're doing a lot of, and then ask yourself, challenge yourself to try something different. And then you can look at what you've done and make decisions about which ones you want to publish. So if you rhyme all the time, try writing an unrhymed poem. If you've never written a haiku or an ode or a list poem, now's your chance. If you using metaphors and similes, personification, if that isn't your jam, challenge yourself to revise your poem with those poetic elements. Tomorrow, with Lorraine, you're going to reflect on the work that we've done together over this last month. Wow, 4 weeks. And you're going to think about what you came into our sessions, what your ideas were about poetry. Did you think it always rhymed or it never rhymed? Whatever your ideas were entering this work together. And now what do you think about poetry? What do you think it is? And we want you to reflect and think about yourself, your growth as a writer and specifically as a poet. So Lorraine will guide you in that reflection tomorrow as we end on Friday with our celebration. Really exciting, lots of surprises, so join us on Friday. And as always, all for poetry and poetry for all. Have a great and safe day, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.